Please be seated. Carl Jung, in the 1950s, coined the phrase, the word synchronicity. You might know it. You might have had experiences of synchronicity. A synchronicity is when this thing over here, that has really nothing to do with this thing over here, suddenly click for you, and there is this coincidental meaning that comes from these two things. It's not a coincidence. There's something more than these two things happening together at that moment that gives you a little sense of meaning or purpose or insight or guidance. And many examples. The one that comes to my mind is you're driving along in your car and you're thinking about someone, maybe even someone that you loved and yet see no longer. And right at that moment, a song comes on the radio that is that person's song. And you think, wow, that can't be a coincidence. There's something significant there. There's something meaningful. I find that the more you decide to kind of be open to that, oddly enough, they become more apparent in your life, and they kind of build on one another. This morning is the first Sunday of Advent, and it happens to be, without getting maudlin, the 18th anniversary of my dad's death. 2007, he died, and so I had it on my calendar. I went, oh, first Advent, and so that's coincidental, but I also have been thinking about my dad and about the meaning of Advent, and I'm going to sort of inject a little meaning into these two, not exactly a synchronicity, but maybe we'll get more to that. My dad, I want to put this, I love my dad and the memory of him, and maybe you've had the experience of revisiting, on an occasion like this, I'm revisiting my dad. And even though he's been gone, for 18 years, every time I revisit him and think about him and relationship to me, and I learn a little more, right? You learn a little more about the person who was here but is no longer here. And my dad was very much wrapped up in the civil rights movement and took off, you might say, with great passion in the direction of all that had to offer. Meaningful. He was hungry for meaning, is how I'm sort of framing this. And the image that comes to my mind is being out on a softball field. And because he left, at an early age from me, and I've thought back on this, I never had the traditional, let's go out to the backyard and play catch, with Dad. So, my arm was never that, I wasn't that coordinated at 8 years old, let alone batting, right? So I didn't get that from my dad, and I'm sort of a tad regretful, maybe even a little resentful that I didn't get that, dad time. So here I am, 8, 9 years old, and the first real organized sport I ever got involved with was softball. And it was all boys, and it was intramural. We just sort of friends, among us. But we'd go out, and there'd be two adults that would kind of get us together, and I had no idea. I'd never played, softball, and I'd never hit a ball. I'd never caught a ball, and so I wanted to go in left field. Said, yep. It seems like that would be far enough away where I'd be safe. And sure enough, I got out there, and there's someone actually took a picture. This is why it sort of sticks in my mind. They creeped up behind me, and I'm sitting like this with my mitt, just out there watching, assuming that nothing was going to come my way, and happy about that, out there in left field. All right, I got to stay with this. So my dad left, and so I mentioned that he had this hunger for meaning. He was an ordained clergy person, and so I want to frame this in a kind of Advent way as well by talking about chronos and kairos. And again, terms you might be familiar with, ancient Greek philosophy. Chronos is the time that is quantitative. It's about minutes and hours and days and weeks, and it's the world that is most familiar to us, and it's the world of obligation and responsibility and getting up and checking your watch and having to go off to do this and off to do that, and it's it's chronological time. It's linear, and it's kind of the world we live in. But man does not live on bread alone. All right, so this chronos thing, as important as it is, and is kind of what's in some ways makes the world go around, we need something more. And kairos is understood to be those moments in the midst of chronos, like an epiphany, that something intersects, interrupts, injects into what otherwise is just sort of day in and day out kind of life on earth with meaning. And it's not something you can control. It's kind of like a synchronicity. You don't create synchronicities, they happen to you. You just, oh, how did that happen? And boom. And so my dad, when I think about him now, loved meaning. We all do, right? And I think his life at that moment in time when he made this decision to leave the family and go off and do this, I think he felt like there was not enough. He was out in left field. There wasn't a whole lot happening. And he had a desire to be right in the thick of it. And so he left and he became part of this whole organization. And I admired him, from afar, and I thought this was all great. And then fast forward about 25 years, and he's back. And he's disappointed. I can tell. He's just kind of, he went off like, whoa, and he came back. And because you can't track down and force kairos to happen, I was convinced that he took off and he wanted to be fed by meaning. And he went out and tried to sort of save the world, but it didn't happen. And so he came back. And that's the thing about kairos, not unlike Advent, right? We have this framing of this season, this first season of the year, that says something's coming. We don't know when, and we can't control it, but it's significant. And it's coming. And that's the thing about those meaningful moments and being in left field. I've now think of myself as so grateful to be out in left field in terms of my life, because it's only in those moments, those many, many details of an average day, that if you are open to it, and this is where the discipline of Advent comes in, that to pause and to be sober. I thought this sermon for me initially was going to be all about sobriety, because what I had been thinking is that the more you just slow down and just open your eyes to all the simple little details that make up chronos, that every little thing that you have to do in the course of a day that seems kind of, automatic and you're on default mode, and no, stop. If you're ever going to be met by kairos, if you're ever going to be fed by meaning, it's not running off to some other country in hopes that you're going to find it. It's returning home and realizing that right here now, with all the relationships we enjoy and share and all the little mundane things that make up your day, it's there. If you're open and you're receptive and you have and you're sober and your house is in order and you have a moment to actually wait for it. You can't control it. You can't call it in. But if you're open to it, it will come. And the more it comes, the more you're attuned to it. So yeah, as I say, I'm repeating myself now, to be out there in left field, it feels it feels good. It feels good to be out there and to know that there's a good chance that there's someone said after this first service that, Brad, I know what you're feeling. I was out in that left field and they told me that no matter where you go, the ball's going to find you. and it's true. I hope it does, and I hope I'm prepared to catch it. But I know that the only way that kairos, the will of God, grace, blessing, comes when you're just open to your everyday life. And the ball is coming, and I hope to catch it.